You guys remember that after the Warner Brothers announcement that they were taking all of their 2021 films and moving them onto HBO Max, my initial reaction was, I get it. I can see why they're doing it. And some people said, well, what about, all the deals with filmmakers? And I said, listen, I'm sure Warner Brothers was smart enough. I said this on the weekend. I said, guys, don't worry. I'm sure Warner Brothers was smart enough to make sure they talked to everybody first and made deals with everybody first and made sure everybody was on board. This was me on the weekend saying this. Don't worry. I'm sure Warner Brothers did everything right to make sure everybody was on board with this before they made the announcement. Turns out they did not. Christopher Nolan immediately came out and ripped them a new one, saying things like, all these filmmakers went to bed thinking they were working for the best movie studio, and then they woke up realizing they actually worked for the worst streaming studio. Those are harsh words, but they're nothing compared to the words that just came from Denis Villeneuve. I'm going to read this at length, guys, because it really is worth it. Denis himself wrote this article for Variety. He wrote this himself, talking about his upcoming movie Dune, which is supposed to hit theaters, but now it's going to do a day and date with HBO Max. Denis wrote this. I learned in the news that Warner Brothers had decided to release Dune on HBO Max. The director of Dune was not so much as given an email from Warner Brothers. He found out by reading the news. Anyway, I learned in the news that Warner Brothers had decided to release Dune on HBO Max at the same time as our theatrical release, using prominent images from our movie to promote their streaming service. With this decision, AT&T has hijacked one of the most respectable and important studios in film history. There is absolutely no love for cinema. This is a guy talking about the studio he's working for. There is absolutely no love for cinema, nor the audience here. It is all about the survival of a telecom mammoth that is currently bearing an astronomical debt of more than $150 billion. Therefore, even though Dune is about cinema and audiences, AT&T is about its own survival and Wall Street. With HBO Max's launch a failure thus far, that's harsh. With HBO Max's launch a failure thus far, AT&T decided to sacrifice Warner Brothers' entire 2021 slate in a desperate attempt to grab the audience's attention. Warner Brothers' sudden reversal from being a legacy home for filmmakers to the new era of complete disregard draws a clear line for me. Filmmaking is a collaboration reliant on the mutual trust of teamwork, and Warner Brothers has declared that they are no longer on the same team. Streaming services are a positive and powerful addition to the movie and TV ecosystems, but I want the audience to understand that streaming alone cannot sustain the film industry as we knew it before COVID. Streaming can produce great content, but not movies of Dune's scope and scale. Warner Brothers' decision means Dune will not have a chance to perform financially in order to be viable, and piracy will ultimately triumph. Warner Brothers might just have killed the Dune franchise. Listen to this again from the director of Dune. Warner Brothers may have just killed the Dune franchise. This one is for the fans. AT&T's John Stankey said that the streaming horse left the barn. In truth, the horse left the barn for the slaughterhouse. Public safety comes first. Nobody argues with that, which is why when it became apparent that the winter would bring a second wave of the pandemic, I understood and supported the decision to delay Dune's opening by almost a year. The plan was that Dune would open in theaters on October 2021 when vaccinations will be advanced and hopefully the virus behind us. Science tells us that everything should be back to a new normal by next fall. Dune is by far the best movie I've ever made. That's saying something coming from Denis Villeneuve. Dune is by far the best movie I've ever made. My team and I devoted more than 3 years of our lives to make it a unique big screen experience. That movie images and sounds were meticulously designed to be seen in theaters. I am speaking on my own behalf, though this is key. I stand in solidarity with the 16 other filmmakers who clearly have talked to each other. I stand in solidarity with the 16 other filmmakers who now face the same fate. Please know that I am with you and that together we are strong. The artists are the ones who create movies and series. I strongly believe the future of cinema will be on the big screen, no matter what any Wall Street dilettante says. Since the dawn of time, humans have deeply needed communal storytelling experiences. Cinema on the big screen is more than a business. It is an art form that brings people together, celebrating humanity, enhancing our empathy for one another. It's one of the very last artistic, in-person collective experiences we share as human beings. He goes on a little bit more, but Rob, to say this was vicious is maybe a bit of an understatement. He went on to call them a lot of names, call their launch of HBO a failure. He says they just don't care about filmmaking. He emphasizes, look, what film fans don't understand, and Rob, this is something you and I have been talking about a lot. Movies the scope of Dune cannot happen simply on streaming. At least not long term. And Denis Villeneuve says, I want audiences to understand that movies like this cannot happen simply and exclusively on streaming. Now, Rob, when Warner Brothers made the announcement, I was very much, I get it. I don't agree with it. I don't like what they're doing, but I get it. And I'm sure everything's fine because I'm sure they talked to everybody. But now we're finding out they didn't talk to their own production partners in Legendary. They didn't talk to the agencies. CAA, the biggest talent agency in Hollywood, wrote a scathing letter to, which we're not going to cover here today, but you guys can go and look it up, to Warner Brothers. Now we're finding out even the filmmakers themselves found out on Twitter or found out by reading the news. Rob, we talked about the specter. By the way, the DGA has reached out to Warner Brothers to say, we need to sit down and talk. Of course, the New York Times alluded to the fact that there is some talk amongst the Directors Guild of America that all the directors may boycott Warner Brothers moving forward. And if the DGA boycotts them, there is a possibility that the Screen Actors Guild, that the Writers Guild could all join in with them. This is ugly. Absolutely ugly. Rob, you read this article written by himself, Denis Villeneuve, one of the most respected by audiences, by studios, filmmakers in the business today.
But when they get calls from lawyers telling them what they can do if they were hired as their litigators, people get angrier and angrier. Warner Brothers will either pay out the back ends like they did for Wonder Woman 84 and The Witches, or they will have to backtrack and not do this streaming plan. I don't see a middle ground. That Villeneuve essay was brutal, but he is attacking the wrong party. It was Toby Emmerich and Carolyn Blackwood of Warner Brothers who came up with the streaming plan and brought it to AT&T. Toby Emmerich thought that if Warner Brothers movies drove more subscriptions to HBO content, they might put him in charge instead of Casey Bloys, who currently outranks him in the streaming content hierarchy. Toby decided that the risk of torching filmmaker relationships was worth the prospects of rising higher in the corporate ranks by looking like the savior of HBO Max. I'm sure Villeneuve will eventually find out, and he is going to feel even more betrayed. As for the contract model, I asked him if HBO Max, because it's AT&T, would adopt a model like phone service, like you'd have a year contract, a 2-year contract. And his answer was, as for the contract model, I doubt they'll adapt something similar to phone service. The closest thing to a long-term contract a streamer will do is give some sort of discount to prepay for a full year or longer. They would lose too much money on the customers who will join just to churn, which is sign up, watch the content they wanted to see, and then cancel. There's still money to be made there.
What is going on with the heads of Warner Brothers? Like Kevin Tsujihara, who was a very smart, shrewd, he led Warner Brothers to a lot of success. But then we find out ultimately he has all these scandals behind the scenes, and he made the decision to force a quick release of Justice League so he could get his bonuses and not let Justice League go into the following year. Now we've got another head of Warner Brothers saying that he's willing to sacrifice all these films and these relationships just maybe so he can get ahead a little bit more in the corporate run without even talking to the people involved, not even reaching out to a director like a Denis Villeneuve or all the other ones. Say, hey, by the way, guys, we're thinking about doing this. Let me hear your thoughts and concerns.
As my industry insider said, they will torch their relationships with filmmakers because they think the filmmakers are going to filmmakers. But you know what? Every agent, every manager, every studio executive, they all fancy themselves filmmakers. They all think they're filmmakers, and they are not. And that's when these decisions happen. And you need to be on the same team together